You're listening to a Roddenberry podcast.
Mission Log, a Roddenberry Star Trek podcast, episode 552, Survival Instinct.
Welcome into another episode of Mission Log, a Roddenberry Star Trek podcast. I'm Norman Lau.
And I'm John Champion. Each week on Mission Log, we examine
an episode of Star Trek, picking it
apart for the
morals, meanings, and messages,
and asking ourselves if the whole thing
stands the test of time.
Wow,
it's
like you're in my head, man.
It's like I know what you're going to say next.
Are we psychically bonded? Is this the next step in human cyborg evolution? Or are we reading from the same template, forged over hundreds of episodes of Mission Log, like the echoes of hundreds of voices keeping us company all the time?
We may never know.
But we do know this. This week's Survival Instinct, the one where 3 ex-Borg show up on Voyager and have a bone to pick with 7 of 9. But it's a Borg bone, so it's got nanoprobes, and it looks great in green lighting. Norman, welcome back to the show. And I shouldn't say welcome back. It's your show, but all these times that we've heard people say, I'm so-and-so sitting in for Norman Lau, and now we got Norman Lau sitting in for Norman Lau. Glad to have you here.
Hey, John, throw me a Borg bone here. I think we just got our the early album name.
I think we did.
Beginning here, yeah.
I think
Borg
we
bone.
did, yeah. Good job. Well, no less thrilled to have you here in the co-pilot. Look, we're both co-pilots on this show, so we're both co-piloting. Glad to have you here, and as we mentioned before, every now and then we're going to have guests drop in when you can't be here, but when you can, you're here, and that seat is warmed up for you. So.
I like it.
Glad you were on board.
It's nice and warm. There's a lot of voices going on in my head right now. I'm trying to sift all of those out, but I don't know. Maybe if I look at some of this, of the notes, because
just focus. Things. Yeah, focus, concentrate on what's next, and then maybe the voices will subside.
Here's what's going to help. I can tell you something that I do know. Mission Log is a conversation about Star Trek. Find the show at missionlog at roddenberry.com and on Facebook at Mission Log Pod. While you're at it, a review and a rating at Apple Podcasts or your favorite podcast platform makes a big difference to the podcasts you love. Always remember, your comments could be used on Mission Log. The Roddenberry Industrial Complex will not be denied. And now here's John Champion with this week's trivia. I knew he knew that I was going to say that.
I knew you were going to say that, yes, and I knew that you knew that I knew that you were going to say that. All right, trivia for Survival Instinct. We have an episode solely credited to Ronald D. Moore as the writer, and there is certainly a name that needs no introduction. Hopefully we all remember that Ron started out on TNG after he showed a spec script that was purchased and later became the episode The Bonding in Season 3. He wrote 28 more episodes for TNG, and he was elevated to producer before he jumped over to DS9 and was credited with 31 episodes on that series. Now, he only has 2 writing credits on Voyager, this being the first, but of course, we know that Ron co-wrote the Trek movies Generations and First Contact, and of course, he goes on to do a lot more in his post-Trek career, including the iconic 2004 reboot of Battlestar Galactica. This episode was directed by Terry Wendell, and you may remember that we met Terry with his first Voyager episode back in the middle of Season 5 with the episode Gravity. He got his start in special effects, and he'll be around for a handful more outings on Voyager, then jump over to Enterprise. Now let's meet our guest stars, all returning champions, as they are veteran Trek performers. Welcome back to Scarlett Palmers as Naomi Wildman, and welcome back to our ex-Borg players. We'll take them in descending numeric order. There's 4 of 9, also known as Pachan, played by Tim Kelleher, and you saw him looking much more human in the TNG finale All Good Things, in which he played Gaines, tactical officer for the future Enterprise D. You may have also caught Tim in genre shows like Fringe or Dollhouse or Dark Skies, and in feature films like Independence Day, and we will see Tim back on Trek for a guest appearance on Enterprise. 3 of 9, also known as her Bajoran name Marika Wilakara, is played by Bettila Damas. Go back to DS9's second season, and you'll find Bertila very recognizable as the Vulcan Sakona in the Maquis Parts 1 and 2. This is Bertila's last Trek appearance, so far anyway, but you may have caught her on Brooklyn Nine-Nine, Roswell, New Mexico, Grimm, or doing one of a handful of voice appearances on King of the Hill. Incidentally, her character was assimilated while serving on the USS Excalibur. You may recall that was the ship that Riker commanded in the TNG episode Redemption Part 2. We don't know the full story after that, but apparently the Borg figure somewhere in its missions after that. And finally, 2 of 9, also known as Lansor, is played by longtime Trek guest star Vaughn Armstrong. We first saw him as a Klingon in TNG's Heart of Glory, and he has turned up since then as a Cardassian, a Romulan, another Cardassian. He can do it all. And he's in that select club of Trek actors who have more than 7 different Trek characters under their belts, not to mention across 4 different series. We've talked about Vaughn's multiple appearances before, and you probably already know that there is a lot more coming.
It's open house day on Voyager, and time for the most awkward family reunion in the history of the Delta Quadrant.
Prologue. The year is 2368. A Borg sphere crashes on a foggy, swampy world. 4 Borg drones, including 7 of 9, gather near a dead drone, assessing their situation. Their ship has crashed. They are cut off from the Borg collective, and the transwarp chamber is about to explode. 7 leads the others away, carrying the dead drone with them. Act 1. Fast forward 8 Earth years to 2376, where the USS Voyager is docked at the Marconian outpost, and Captain Janeway has authorized a technology and cultural exchange. The ship buzzes with activity, and Janeway's ready room is filled with gifts from alien delegations. Chakotay brings yet another gift, while Tuvok presents a report on minor thefts, mostly overlooked by Janeway due to the rarity of friendly faces in the Delta Quadrant that they have not yet seen and are meeting for the first time. Despite these issues, Janeway and Chakotay are pleased with the overall progress. In Astrometrics, Naomi Wildman reminds 7 of 9 about their lunch date. As they navigate a crowded corridor, Naomi tries to squeeze through, but 7's commanding "stand aside" clears the way. During lunch, Naomi begins identifying aliens by Borg designations. 7 reminds her that both she and Naomi's mother disapprove. The crowd unsettles 7, prompting Naomi to suggest they leave. Before they do, a scarred man approaches and asks if she's 7 of 9. When she confirms, he shows her Borg synaptic relays from Unimatrix 01. Startled, 7 accepts the implants and quickly leaves. The man mentally communicates Stage 2 is complete. She has the relays to his accomplices located in engineering and a corridor. They receive the message and plan to infiltrate Voyager's security. Act 2. In 2368, 4 marooned Borg drones plan to extract parts from a dead drone to build a communications beacon to contact the collective. 3 of them resemble the conspirators we have seen earlier. While working, one of them recalls the religious beliefs of his deity, Brothera, regarding the treatment of the dead, but 7 of 9 sternly instructs them to focus on their task. In the present, 7 and Chief Engineer Belana Torres examine Borg synaptic relays in Cargo Bay 2. Meanwhile, the 3 conspirators in the mess hall debate their plan and ultimately agree to proceed. In Cargo Bay 2, 7 sets up a relay for a multipolar analysis which will take 5 hours and 17 minutes. To pass the time, she enters her alcove for regeneration. The conspirators tap into the ship's computer to sense her regeneration and reroute internal sensors. Then they wait for a turbolift to empty before boarding. Once inside, the woman halts the lift while the older man undoes a ceiling grate. On the bridge, Tuvok alerts Chakotay to a power failure in the security grid. The conspirators quietly drop into Cargo Bay 2, where Chakotay informs Janeway of the security breach. Approaching Seven's alcove, the man unwraps Borg components, while the woman reveals her scarred leg, indicating that she, too, is a former Borg drone. She removes a Borg interlink nodule from her leg and inserts it into Seven's console. The young man worries about harming Seven, but the woman insists, if we fail, we'll never become individuals. He nods and plunges his assimilation tubules into her neck. The older man reports successful access to Seven's memory files, but they soon realize she is waking up and fighting back. Tuvok enters with 2 security officers and stuns the intruders. Act 3. In 2368, the Borg survivors of Unimatrix 01 gather around their campfire to prepare food, triggering pre-assimilation memories in 7 of 9, who recalls camping with her father. As the others eat, they remember their identities, Lansor, Pachan, and Marika Wilkara, and their lives before assimilation. Lansor was dining with friends while he was assimilated, while Wilkara was a Starfleet officer taken from the USS Excalibur. Horror sets in as they examine their implants. Unlike Seven, who was assimilated as a child, the others had experienced adulthood and individuality, which terrifies her. Fearfully, she commands them to stop talking until they are reassimilated by the collective. In the present, in sickbay, Seven and Captain Janeway listen to the doctor's report on the 3 former drones, recognized as 2 of 9, 4 of 9, and 3 of 9. The doctor explains that their implant removal was poorly executed, leaving them scarred and with damaged organs. He reveals their left parietal lobes have been turned into interlinked nodes, creating a mini hive mind. Janeway orders the doctor to wake them and demands to know what they want with Seven. They explain that they are trapped in a mental link formed during reassimilation, unable to break it after escaping. Though they are no longer Borg, they share dreams and hear each other's voices, often finishing each other's sentences. This maddening link has to end, and they believe Seven holds the key in her memory files. Unable to recall anything herself, Seven agrees to let them access her memories, and Janeway authorizes the procedure. Act 4. In Cargo Bay 2, Seven, Lansor, Pachan, and Marika use Borg equipment to check their memory files, discovering a gap between their time around the campfire and when they rejoined the collective. This frustrates the 3 former drones as they struggle to navigate their shared link. Meanwhile, in her ready room, Janeway disciplines Tom and Harry for a cultural gaming exchange turned street brawl, then listens as Seven reports a troubling memory gap regarding her experiences with her former collective quote-unquote family from Unimatrix 01. She questions why the collective would erase the memories of retrieved drones, suggesting a risky solution, linking Seven's neural interface with theirs to restore the missing data. Janeway agrees. The doctor monitors the link in Cargo Bay 2, cautioning that he may not be able to help if things go wrong. As the procedure begins, the scene shifts to 2368, where Seven has left the other drones to assist a dying drone in the swamp, but her efforts fail. Upon returning, she finds the others asserting their individuality and refusing to rejoin the collective. In desperation, she reestablishes control over 2 of 9, 4 of 9, and 3 of 9 by plunging her assimilation tubules into them, restoring their compliance to serve the collective. Back in the present, Seven awakens to find the furious Lansor, Pachan, and Marika blaming her for their link. Overwhelmed, she screams for help, prompting Tuvok's immediate entrance as they collapse. The doctor requests assistance to get them into sickbay. Act 5. The trio of ex-Borg drones, Lansor, Pachan, and Marika, are in neural shock after breaking their most recent link with Seven. The doctor informs Seven that removing the microcortical implants would save them, but ultimately kill them, while returning them to the collective would ensure their survival as drones. Seven seeks advice from Chakotay, who reminds her that a month of individuality is preferable to lifetime as a drone. Seven seeks advice from Chakotay, who reminds her that a month of individuality is preferable to a lifetime as a drone. Feeling guilty about forcibly linking the others to avoid dying alone in the past, Seven decides to have the nodes removed. The doctor hesitates, emphasizing his duty to preserve their lives, but Seven argues that true freedom is worth the risk. Moved by her reasoning, he agrees to the procedure. After the nodes are removed, the three X-drones enjoy the silence in the mess hall. Lancer chooses to meet new people on the station. Pichan opts for solitude on an uninhabited planet, and Marika wishes to stay on Voyager, expressing her resentment towards Seven, but understanding her actions. As Voyager resumes its course at warp speed, Naomi Wildman visits Seven in Astrometrics to offer comfort, to simply be with her, with family. The end.
All right, Norm, nicely done. Welcome back to form, doing the old recap there. I gotta say, at the beginning, it really is, I guess, one of these hallmarks of Brannon's work. I mean, and maybe Ron picked it up from him, but to do the short, very tight teaser section without a whole lot of dialogue, and you just get right to the intriguing setup. And I gotta say, I'm definitely intrigued by it, but it also made me wonder, like, how often does this happen? Like, how often do Borg get lost and their collective communication cuts off? And I guess so much so to the extent that in this episode we learned that there is a protocol for that. Like, there are survival mechanisms that kick in. So this is just a thing that happens, I guess. And maybe it happens too often. That's how you end up with a whole other, Borg planet somewhere if they just start assimilating like crazy.
Are you saying there are survival instincts that fire off?
Yes, I am. Yes, I am indeed.
Because I can sync with your thoughts. You know
yes,
that.
Yeah. I know for sure.
I had a whole Godfather scene in mind with like Seven grabbing the drone. It's like, leave the drone. Take the cannoli.
Yeah.
Come on, people. We got to start off with a laugh.
Good call.
Okay.
Good use of the CG budget here. I thought I loved seeing a giant space station, the kind of thing that they would never build a model for. But I wish that we spent more time actually in there. I want to get some background story on the whole thing. Who are these people that built it? Just anything. But I thought it was cool what we got of it.
So I like the stuff that's being dragged into Janeway's ready room, but it's a pretty good close-up with like natural bright room lighting. So, you can tell that was like a telescoping camera stand.
I think it was a C.
That Beltran was.
Yeah, I think it was a C stand that he was holding upside down.
Okay, so the point is, be really careful when you're signing those petitions to have these episodes from the 90s done in HD.
Yeah.
You may not like what you find.
Yeah, they literally took a C-stand, turned it upside down, put some like balsa wood and styrofoam paddles on the end of it. That's it.
Especially with that kind of room lighting, the overhead, fluorescent room lighting does not work.
It was a bit Universal Studios 1977 lighting, not your sexy Marvin Rush Star Trek lighting, right? Now, I do love, I think that whole beginning of Act 1 is fun and interesting. It's very kinetic. And I love just seeing Voyager crowded and busy and just full of stuff, things that don't belong there, because it makes for good business for the actors to do, but it just livens it up, and it just drives home the idea that Voyager has had to make contact and find allies and not just go around getting into trouble. Like they have to make trade. This is the kind of scene that I wish we had throughout the first 5 seasons.
I get the whole kind of like Mos Eisley spaceport, aliens, crowded chaos kind of thing. I also get that Tuvok's not happy with it, and I think he's a little too brushed off too quickly. I do like the scene where Seven cuts through the chatter in the hallway. She says, everyone stand aside. It reminded me of in The Princess Bride when Andre the Giant's Fezzik says, "Everybody move!"
Right.
And, they just, the three just kind of traipse through. I thought that was nice.
Perfect.
I don't know if it's like an odd or a nod or anything like that, but it's just like, okay, there's something spiritual.
Well, and if you want to leave it to the correct actor to deliver that and make it work, you give it to Jerry. This is great. It was perfectly done. Like you, I love Tuvok's business in this whole thing. And I, it's just nice to have Naomi back. I think she's so well written, and I think her relationship with Seven and with, to a lesser extent, the other characters, but they're really driving home the relationship with Seven. Well done. Again, I ask, where is her mom?
Right. Right. I was thinking about that, and let's be honest. So, Auntie of one. is Naomi's mom now.
That's
really.
great.
Right?
That's
her designation, Auntie O'Connor.
I like that. Very provocative idea that is really not the point of the episode, but just this idea that there is a market for Borg parts. First of all, very hard to get, and you would think that anybody who knows what they're getting, they would know that they are dangerous. They could just, sprout tubules and nanoprobes at any given moment.
I got some hot Borg parts for you.
Right. And also, by the way, very presumptuous of Seven just to say, yeah, Janeway will pay for them. Like, with what? Just
$1 million.
just replicate a bunch of paper bills. Like, here, give us one. Don't look as we put it into our replicator, and then tell the replicator to make 1 million of them.
A currency that you can't replicate. I would like 12 billion bars of gold pressed latinum. We can't
do that.
You know we can't do that. Yeah. So going back to Tuvok, because it's a light moment, but it's not a light moment because when you really think about it, how do sensors under Tuvok's command not pick up the frequency of Borg drone implants when they're smuggled onto the ship?
Come on, man. If you're going to scan for anything, scan for Borg,
Seriously.
I'm
saying.
Now, the more that we get into those flashback scenes, there are no individuals here. I thought it was very interesting to see them all deal in their own way with their emergent identities. This was good stuff, and it builds very well in the episode with Seven's, I think, I guess the right word is anxiety, her fear, all of that coming out, all played very well.
I don't know Borg history like our fans out there know Borg history, but I always thought that when a Borg drone is created, that all of what made them was pretty much kind of suppressed.
Yeah,
like put to the side. So how does that come back? I always thought it was kind of like being like a hard drive being rewritten.
Well,
maybe I'm,
I mean, that's interesting because I had kind of always thought of it as like a sort of like a zombie state thing, sort of being somewhat aware. I mean, didn't Picard describe it that at some point that he was aware that he had been taken over by the Borg, but there was nothing he could do about it? And I wonder...
He's Locutus, though. Yeah. That makes it different because they can't erase him and then get the codes to Starfleet, at the same time. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Like, they would just... why not just download it and then just kind of... I don't understand it. Yeah. Again, I'm not a smart man when it comes to these things. That's why I'm asking all of you out there send all the emails. What I do know is that they're eating.
Yes.
I know John probably has a note about this. And I remember Seven having a problem with overcoming eating for pleasure versus nutrition. I wonder if the three of them had that same issue.
Right, yeah. It was interesting to see them like cooking meat over a hearth. And I wondered the same thing. Like, how does that actually work? Are they going to be okay with it? And maybe it is just, again, part of that survival protocol that it kicks in and is like, no, you're going to eat nutrition in order to stay alive. Which I think is a little bit counter to what we saw in an earlier episode where we just saw a damaged Borg and it gets picked clean apart for parts. So, yeah. But I do want to come back to some of the ideas that get raised in this in this act, in this sequence. You've got the idea of Seven feeling nostalgia for her Borg time, and then the idea of 2, 3, and 4 having to work with consensus all the time. I thought that was interesting that the three of them have this collective issue, but they should be used to it because their programming as Borg were... It was already like that, By the way, I liked the incredible display of phaser accuracy when Tuvok's security team walks in. That Seven's in the middle of a fight with 2, 3, and 4. They all get hit. Seven does not. That's got to be a Starfleet first.
In this Star franchise, our security actually hits the targets.
That's right.
I'm just saying.
That's right. Hey, if you ever work as a waiter in a restaurant, just make sure that you work in your biomatter is ready to to your guests. I think that's a good phrase to use. And again, I mentioned it before, but good scenes with the drones remembering their former lives, just the pieces coming back in, and Seven having so much more of a problem with it than anyone. Obviously, as they hammer home in the story that she was assimilated as a child, and that changes her perspective and her experience on the whole thing.
I have this huge segment that I hope the audience can appreciate how badly written I've just written this, but I'm going to say it anyway. Do the Borg find comfort around a campfire? Do all humanoid species share campfire tales?
Interesting.
Would Bones share his bourbon and beans with them if they did? I mean, this entire joke, not my joke, the setup, this entire joke writes itself. Bourbons, beans, and Borg, an explosive combination.
There you go. Leave it to the good doctor. Yeah.
And because I love alliteration and I love The Office, for all of you Office fans out there, barbecue, Borg, Battlestar Galactica, because Ron Moore. Right?
You're welcome.
And another, John, this is a true, serious Epicurean question. How is Borg-BQ not a thing at convention menus? And any of you out there that go to STLV or any of those conventions, if they do Borg-BQ, that's mission log, that's trademark.
Copyright,
right now.
All rights reserved, and make sure your biomatter is thoroughly cooked. Yes, I love that. Borg-BQ needs to be a thing. Now, I've been using, very recently, we talked before we recorded today about difficulty falling asleep. I've been trying to use white noise more to fall asleep, usually the ocean or rain. And I wonder if someone has a Borg Collective 10-hour track on YouTube that I could fall asleep to. And I wondered now, are these the only Borg who have ever plotted their own escape? And of course, why doesn't Seven remember any of this stuff? Well, more to add to the discussion later. Yeah.
It's like the Dirty Dozen.
Yeah,
so you have 7 of 12,
right,
9 of 12.
Right.
I do love how good the makeup is on Von Armstrong's Lansor.
Yeah,
He's in the med bay, like the tubules, and just there's a lot of exposed Borg stuff going. Phrasing. In the episode, but again. That's the kind of stuff I want to see in HD, not necessarily the other stuff that we didn't want to see in HD.
No, I agree.
Not the game turned, combat mechanics.
Yep.
With Chakotay.
Lots of interesting things could be made out of Seven saying that Seven, it is my name, as we deal with the other three kind of trying to attach to their pre-Borg names and get rid of their designations. Because we've talked about that before, about her choice to be identified as she chooses to be identified, and other characters sometimes dead naming her as Annika. Really interesting stuff. Really interesting to hear that assertion from her here, saying, no, this is who I am.
Again, not to jump the timeline, but as the kids say nowadays, I try and be relevant, a little bit more relevant to our younger audience. That line hits so hard today, and the writing slaps.
Yeah, there you go. Well said.
Yeah. I do love the scene where all the 3 Borg drones they're individually saying their thoughts, speaking their thoughts, then all of a sudden they start merging their speech into one unison, uniformed voice. I thought it was really well done.
Really well done, and really tragically what we hear, we're not individuals, we're not Borg, we're nothing. Because they're denied the ability that Seven has, which is to become something new that is her own development, and these 3 are just lost. I mean, it really is kind of sad to hear. And then, of course, we have the contractual obligation scene with Tom and Harry causing a ruckus. I just, oh my God. Of all the ways to work them into the story, here's the teenagers getting into trouble again.
The way I saw it, this is what they got into. Drunken alien tetherball.
That was it.
Right?
Yeah.
I liked that scene a lot.
Really?
I loved it when Janeway said, well, did you win?
Okay, well, yes, I do appreciate Janeway's take on this. If she had been that cool when Harry got an alien girlfriend, maybe it would have been better.
Oh, so soon.
I know. Yeah. Oh my gosh. Well, and this really kind of fast forwards to the heart of the story, but Seven saying, Naomi Wildman, do you consider me to be family? And then Naomi asking the same of Seven, and Seven says, I have no objection. Really good stuff foreshadowing what is to come later. Really a nice payoff there. Then the neural link flashback that we got. Again, we've had multiple flashbacks, but this particular one about the neural link, very interesting. Really appreciate seeing the pain on Seven's face when the other drone dies. And then the anguish when the others try to stay individual. It just so well acted. And, again, for this to be a total fantasy scenario, something very high concept science fiction, it feels very human and really driven by heart, and just a great way to heighten all the personal drama happening in the episode.
I'm glad the makeup has advanced to a point where you can actually see the actors emote through the makeup and the prosthetics, the implants, I should say, because being able to watch Jerry basically act through one eyeball is pretty remarkable. Right? Especially with the wounded drone sequence, and then, flashing forward to when the three actors are kind of like in her face. I mean, I want to hate something about like her as an actor or as a performer, but I can't. You try and find something in it. I mean, it's all wrong with you. You try and find something that you crack the armor of, like something who just delivers such greatness, and you can't, and it's frustrating because everyone does have an Achilles heel, and apparently she doesn't.
Yeah,
so,
right.
Hey.
Right. Right, so we get to the dramatic reveal of the story, what Seven did to these other three drones. But here's the thing. All right, so she created the neural link to make the other three Borg comply, but then she didn't do it to herself. So then she just kind of orders them around. And I thought that was a little disingenuous, maybe, because she is at this point trying to be more Borg than anybody. And it seems like if you're going to make these three neurally linked, then you have to do it to yourself as well. It's maybe a little, she's trying to have her cake and eat it too.
But she kind of parent trapped them. You know what I mean? So I don't want to go too far into it, but that's the decision that Annika makes. Yeah. Because Seven at that time, she's still just 7 years old. Yeah. In her brain.
True. Right? And then, wow, we really do get into some heavy stuff here to wrap up the show. I mean, just the whole idea of Seven describing, imagining her own death without even the sound of another drone to comfort me, which is so strange to hear anyway, but again, played so realistically and beautifully that you can't help but feel it.
My guilt is irrelevant. Again, the reason why I brought up what I said earlier, and I apologize if I used hate too strongly as a word, but her delivery on lines of such importance is so good. I can't stand it. I can't stand it because it's not just acting, it's emoting. Yeah. Right? It's really making a connection with the audience, and you can feel it. You can feel the contradiction in the delivery. Yeah. And it's just glorious to watch.
Yeah, exactly. I like this moment toward the end that we give each of the X-drones an individual way to say goodbye to Seven. And you can tell, like, first of all, that's all in character. And second of all, it sort of drives home that there are so many mixed feelings to deal with here. Just, again, a perfectly written scene. And talk about showing without telling, particularly Vaughn Armstrong doesn't have to say anything. You know exactly where he's coming from.
There's a really interesting comparison in this scene from what they're talking about to, say, like a terminal illness. It reminds me of probably one of the quintessential scenes in science fiction, and I'm talking about Roy Batty from Blade Runner, played by the great Rutger Hauer, when he says, like tears in rain, talking about, the lifespan or lack thereof that he's facing, like right at that moment. But at the same time, though, he was able to see, things that you would not believe. And is that worth the lifetime that they're talking about?
Yeah, exactly.
One of the most punctuated, I guess, scenes of this episode. It's when Seven of Nine chokes back the tears when Three of Nine said to her about, the line about, "I understand what you did, but I won't forgive you."
Yeah.
Right? There's this wonderful contradiction that Jerry understands about Seven, where Seven acknowledges it because it's true, but it's also painful.
Yeah, exactly. And as if that isn't enough of an emotional gut punch, then you get to this really lovely but also very emotional scene at the end, and just leave it to Naomi Wildman to stick the landing and deliver the message.
There are no laws against sitting around and having the most sinister lunch gathering imaginable, but you should be prepared for people to think it looks pretty sinister.
So an episode with a lot that we can unpack in a lot of different ways, and there are little moments that I like to point out that may not necessarily speak to the big picture or the most important message of the drive home, but there's a little moment there, this little scene between Seven and B'Elanna, where B'Elanna uses the word nostalgia to describe what Seven is feeling. And I thought it was a pretty interesting word to use that as Seven is looking at these relics from the past, this Borg technology. I mean, nostalgia is usually a word used in a positive or emotionally resonant context. But what if you do have nostalgia for things that are more or less objectively negative? Like, Seven has made it very clear that she is guilty and remorseful and horrified about her life as a Borg, and she wants to carry on without anything to do with that. I mean, it's not Stockholm Syndrome necessarily, but I always was interested in stories about people who grew up under, like, the Soviet system and then had nostalgia for the East, or as it's called, Ostalgia. And it was the products and the music and the culture and the feeling of collective identity, just the things that they were used to. And it's well presented in a movie that I've mentioned on Mission Log before, Goodbye Lenin. So if anybody's interested in how that plays out in this, very fanciful, kind of heartfelt family way, you can see that. Yeah, I mean, did you make anything of that scene other than just like, well, maybe B'Elanna didn't quite choose the right word? Because
I agree, yeah. I don't think nostalgia in the strict sense of the word is something that... Nostalgia usually means something positive. Like it's a positive anchor to the past. Yeah. There's a reason why you want to remember these things. And getting nostalgic about Borg implants, especially Borg implants specifically tied into her history as Unimatrix 01, as the adjunct of Unimatrix 01.
Yeah.
It's akin to, say, going to a dinner at a German restaurant and somebody like walking up to you, opening up a briefcase and saying, with a Walther P-38 with a Waffen SS engraved, symbol engraved on it, and saying, "Look at this gun! Doesn't it bring you waves of nostalgia?" I'm like, no, it really doesn't.
Right.
The beer does. The pretzels do. Like the schnitzel does. Yeah. Not necessarily the Nazi iconography.
Yeah.
Right?
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. All right, and then as we get to know these three ex-Borg a little bit more, I thought it was interesting the way they interacted with each other, talking about how they need consensus and they can't act without it. I wondered about that. Like, is there something that will happen if they don't all agree and don't all behave together? Because we don't see the consequence if they don't. And I thought, okay, well, definitely it's a residual effect of their Borg experience, also a part of their physiology now with this neural link that they have that they don't understand. And I thought, like, Okay, well, on the surface, that's not a bad thing to have, that you operate with consensus. But if there's never a voice of dissent, then you can run into some pretty huge problems. And I guess that is part of the benefit of being connected to the collective, is that, well, ultimately, if you have to have this thing that is a Borg queen to be a tiebreaker, I guess, then you have to have that. You have to have a thing that enforces consensus, because, God forbid, you have something like this where you have 3 of 9 just going like, oh, no, well, I don't totally agree, but I'll sort of go along with it, but I might not move as fast as the others, you know? So run into some issues there. I also found it interesting that they described that billions of voices were comforting, that this is just white noise that fades into the background. But three voices is torture, sharing dreams and hearing thoughts. And I thought, maybe there is a method of mental discipline. Like, where's Tuvok in all of this, who potentially could have offered a mind meld to say, hey, we're going to try to straighten out what you're experiencing here. But
he was busy being ignored.
He's often busy being ignored. But we've had this before, especially in the early days of Seven, where she can't cope with the idea of being alone with her thoughts. And now the idea is like, that was a sort of background noise. It was a sort of a comforting thing that I can push to the background. But you meet these 3 and they can't deal with it at all.
I have an entire thought process, with the consensus issue, because there's something out there that's well known as analysis paralysis, where you can continue to try and what if the situation and logic it to death, and you can't really get out of that loop of analysis paralysis. So interesting thing also with 3 is that you had Lansor being very alpha.
Yeah.
You had Marika also being very alpha. Then you had Pachan in the middle, who's basically the tiebreaker to whoever is alpha-ing him most.
Yeah. Right.
So is that really the tiebreaker, right?
Right.
Or it's just the false equivalent of acknowledgement.
Yeah.
So so that's kind of like an interesting thing. It's basically like you have 2 parents and let the child decide, whose parent that he's going to drive with, because this parent, I love you the most.
Yeah.
So obviously there's a veiled threat between. It's like, we're not going to go to get ice cream unless you come with me. Right?
Yeah. That's played out well.
But then 7 basically says, well, you know what? I'm going to just completely undo all this, and like, none of you go to ice cream until you come with me.
Right.
All of you.
Right.
So I thought that was really interesting. I'll talk about that in terms of group dynamic in a more psychological study based on a paper that I read later on.
Okay. All right. Very interested in that. There's something going on with 7 here that I thought was interesting, not because it necessarily speaks to her arc in the story, but it caused me to pause a moment and compare her to some of the other great iconic Star Trek characters, namely Spock and Worf, because here we have...
Did you really say Worf?
I did. Well, and here's why I think that Worf is a great character.
I'm just kidding. Folks, calm down.
Not a great father. But,
okay, that's fair.
Yeah,
that's
fair. But a great character in this respect. On the planet, in these flashbacks, she is the most adhered to being Borg. Again, all makes sense because you understand that she was assimilated as a child, about 6 years old-ish. So that time up until adulthood, when we catch up with her, she's had much more formative time to be nothing but Borg. And when you come back 8 years later, okay, she's the only one who isn't connected to the neural link, and she's way more Borg-like than the other 3, just on the surface. Because these other 3 have had they had this taste of individuality, then they get severed from the link again, but they're still living with this neural link amongst themselves. but they've had time to develop their personalities and reclaim a bit of who they were. So here's where I look at Spock and Worf. These are characters who aren't fully one thing. They're somehow stuck in the middle. So how do they all react? They all react by trying to be more than what the culture is that they're from, more than it actually dictates. Spock tries to be so Vulcan until such a point that he can't handle it anymore. He tries to go through Kolinar, can't do it. He's got to go figure out how to be human again. Worf tries to be so Klingon to the point of sucking all the fun out of it, And all the other Klingons call him out about it constantly. This is the thing that I like about Worf. So then you look at Seven. She tries to be so Borg in contrast to her human side. And I think that's what makes it so much more satisfying to see the human elements of her emerge. Her sense of humor, her sense of family, the sense of remorse, the sense of individuality. Like, all of these things have a lot of payoff because she is presenting herself as so unemotional and so removed from her human side that it's really this beautiful reveal to get these little glimpses of the individual that actually is in there. And you know what? I like that it's Seven. Again, I mentioned this in the last segment, but Seven is the one who decided that her former name was no longer appropriate. You would think that somebody who was trying to be human would say, oh, no, I'm definitely removing myself from everything Borg. But she's still holding on to these things that identify her as Borg, even though she uses the pronoun I. She doesn't talk about herself as being part of a we, part of a collective anymore. But I love seeing this journey. It is something that is carved out so well in the tradition of these other characters.
Now, if you indulge me here for a second, and you, our lovely listeners, you have basically set me up perfectly on a series of notes that you have not yet read.
Fantastic. See, I love it when that happens. Yeah. All right. Lay it on me, man.
Okay, so what we're talking about, at least what you're saying and what I'm understanding and what I believe a majority of our discussion in this episode is about, there's a paper that I read online recently about group thought, group dynamics, especially in modern times, especially now with this October 24th, we're recording this 2024. And I read this article, Why Do People Act Differently in Groups Than They Do Alone? I also interpret it as How Modern Group Dynamics Reflect the Borg. Now, this paper I found online from waldenu.edu. And the article states, social psychology helps explain the interesting ways we behave when we're in a group. Now, bear with me here because I want to really kind of read through the paper that I have dissected just for the interpretation of the basic bullet points. Yeah. This is from the paper. Have you ever gone along with the crowd only to end up doing something you regretted? Have you ever joined a team and embraced challenges you would have never embraced on your own? In both cases, being part of a group changed the way you made decisions. But why? Groups produce conformity. Point 1. In modern times, groups protect us from loneliness and or purposelessness. By conforming, we demonstrate our willingness to be a part of the group, thus increasing the likelihood the group will protect us. Conformity can be a positive force if the group supports positive behaviors, but our conformity impulse is so strong that it can overwhelm our better judgment. Each one of these points, as I outline these to you and to the audience, you'll see how it applies to what we're talking about. Point 2, groups police behavior. Groups often use ostracization or the threat of it to keep everyone in line with the norms of the group. You're seeing kind of Seven flex that a little bit in the flashback parts of this episode. Point 3, groups normalize behaviors. This is very important. If the group says a behavior is okay, we are likely to believe it is indeed okay. This is called normalization, and it goes deeper than mere conformity. With conformity, we follow a group's norms for the sake of getting along. When a specific behavior is normalized in us, We believe it to be normal and proper, which bonds us strongly to groups that believe the same. Depending on what is being normalized, normalization can either be positive, quote-unquote, eating healthy is normal, or negative, quote-unquote, using drugs is normal, or negative, quote-unquote, not following the orders of the collective is negative. Groups intensify attitudes. This is point 4. If you join a group of people with opinions similar to your own, your opinions are likely to intensify. Polarization occurs because when our opinions are reinforced by others, we become more certain that our opinions are right and less aware of counter-arguments. Again, echo chamber of the Borg. Right? There is no individuality, and everything that you think, everyone else thinks, therefore less aware of counter-arguments or less aware of independence.
Right.
Now, this is probably the sticking point. This is where it applies to 7. Leaders make a difference. Bad leaders gain personal power by exploiting our urge to conform, using fear of ostracization or worse to motivate action, normalizing unethical behavior to justify their own misdeeds, and or stifling dissent in order to make their opinions the only opinions. Good leaders, however, can use the ways groups influence behavior to help group members improve themselves and help the group improve an organization or society as a whole. Now, let's bring this all the way back full circle to 7's choice as the leader of Unimatrix 01 on the planet. How did this all relate to her decisions, both 1, on the planet, and 2, in sickbay to unlink the 3 drones? Did she make the right choice for what Janeway considers to be 7's quote-unquote found family, and rather have them reconform to the Borg and survive, instead of suffering what 7 believes to be the weakness of individuality? Did 7 allow them the freedom to atone for her mistake, or to truly embrace them as the found family she believed them to be 8 years ago on the planet? When all of this is analyzed, what we have here is a 7-year-old girl who only knows what she believes was the right thing to do to keep herself and her family together. The macro of this is heartbreaking.
Oh my God, dude, you have said so much, and thank you for bringing that academic perspective on it as well, because as you're saying that, I'm thinking so much that we will never be able to get to here in the confines of a singular podcast episode. So I look forward to further conversation, whether, it's listeners contacting us after this comes out or in our Discord later for After Dark. But I just want to hit on a couple of points here that really resonated with me, because when you boil it down like that, first of all, yes, it is such an essentially human story. This tragically lost person whose emotional, familial, social development, everything is cut off at this young age, and desperately trying to cling to the one thing that she has, the one thing that she understands, which is keep these people together for me, because I can't bear the thought of not having them around me. It is truly tragic. The other thing that I thought about here is the level of control of the group, which I think we can see in many different ways. The malignant version of that being the Borg, the more benevolent version of that, hopefully, being Starfleet, being the experience of being on the ship in that sort of found family. And then this micro version that we see of what is the collective among the 3 ex-Borg, and then the collective of the 3 ex-Borg plus 7, and how she relates to them, how they interact. The group, all these descriptions you described, first of all, as you mentioned, we're recording this in late 2024. Please draw your own conclusions about how this applies to any number of groups that exist in the real world today. I find myself often going back to describing the Borg, as we have many times before, in the sense of cult-like behavior, because you can use a group to enact and enable incredible things that push people beyond what they think their inherent limits are. But those same exact groups can be manipulated to do awful things. And as we have said before on the show, nobody joins a cult. People join organizations that speak to their values, that speak to their emotional needs and their societal needs, and then sadly find themselves in situations where they act in ways that benefit the group, but are not either healthy individually or may not be healthy to the society at large. They only keep the group going. They only keep the cult sustaining itself. Again, you can draw any number of conclusions about any number of historical or contemporary examples that do that. The final thing that I want to point out, and you talk about Seven's decision that she made 8 years ago and the decision that she has to make now. I want to steer this in a very slightly different direction, and I know that we don't want to belabor our time here, but there's one other thing that I will leave for you and for our audience to think about as well. Seven seeks counsel with Chakotay and with the Doctor. And I'm so glad that we have these two scenes back to back, because we need to experience Seven's thought process. We need to understand what's going on there, and we need to understand the points of view coming at her. This is Star Trek in the very classic sense of, Kirk seeking counsel from logical Spock, emotional McCoy, and trying to strike the right balance between the two to make a decision. Chakotay makes great points. The Doctor makes great points. The EMH, though, the Doctor, is bound by the Hippocratic Oath to do no harm. He knows if he carries out this procedure, they will die in very short order. But there is a way to keep them alive. But which is more harmful? Which is the one that actually causes harm? And I could not help but look at this scene and look at these decisions as an end-of-life decision. If we wanted to make it a real-world parallel here, is it better to be, quote-unquote, alive, connected to machines that are doing the hard work for you? Because it is literally what would happen. They would be not just connected to machines, they would be machines. Or is it better to live a shorter time but with the freedom of being oneself? It is almost impossible when somebody else is put into the position of making that decision for somebody else. And here's Seven being put in that position of making a decision for three people who were her family, for lack of a better word there. I think in the way that this plays out as a slice of Star Trek, well, I'm getting ahead of myself and jumping to the final segment, but it shows the power of this show and shows the power of good writing to be able to so utterly humanize something that is completely inhuman in our own perspective.
Is there a card that's punched every time you have to be assimilated again? I hope these poor people got some free Borg pizza or something.
All right, our instincts didn't fail us, and we survived to get here to the end of Survival Instinct. And as we do, it's time to wrap it all up and ask ourselves if the episode holds up and if we learned anything in the process of viewing it and analyzing and discussing it. Norman, I got to say, again, what I said in the last segment, I so look forward to the continued conversation of this, because there's only so much ground we can cover here, and I feel like there is so much to be said about this episode. So why don't you hit us up first here and let me know, do you think this episode holds up?
All right, so I know that when listeners hear me say that, all right, so, I think they're like preparing themselves for a certain tone.
Right.
So prepare yourselves for a certain tone. At first, I thought this was going to be, like one of these route narrative choices that we have seen on Voyager since the start of Season 4. 1, another Borg episode. Really? 2, another Borg getting in touch with their feelings episode. Really? 3, another Borg and Seven discovering individuality episode. Again, and really. And you know what? In this episode, Survival Instinct, I was right on all counts. But here's the kicker. I am getting to something positive. But I was wrong in my expectations in every way. And I am here for this. And I hope you're here for this too, John.
Okay, I am.
I love, and you can quote me on this. This is recording. I love being proven wrong. I love having my expectations subverted. And after hyperbolically rolling my eyes back into focus after they've gotten a good look at my tonsils, I got over myself and found something really unique in this episode. That it is not a Borg episode, that it is more than a 7 episode. This is the found family, quote unquote, capital, bold, underline episode that I think I've been waiting for. Now, I know at Mission Log, we generally don't jump the timeline, so I'll make my references brief. In 2 future series from Voyager, both heavily feature Voyager and 7 of 9 tangentially. Picard and Prodigy. Picard with 7, Prodigy with Voyager. And we see a very significant through line with the 7 of this in-universe era of the 1990s, the late 1990s era of Voyager, and the Janeway that I have loved in Prodigy. So we're clear on why I love this episode, where I'm going with this.
Yeah.
And the Janeway that I have loved in Prodigy, and quite honestly, more in Voyager seasons 1 than, say, season 3 of 4 till now, especially when Janeway is concerned.
Yeah.
The Janeway that was the figurehead, the maternal guiding force, an overall familiar anchor of this found family, this is the Janeway that I love. And what we're returning to, I believe, at least in this episode. Especially, again, in Prodigy, where, say, the younger crew members are concerned, and by contrast, where in seasons 1 through 3, the younger crew members like Kes and Harry were concerned. They need this Janeway.
Right.
This is the Janeway, John, that I think you and I fell in love with.
Yeah.
And I've missed this Janeway a lot. And I'm glad that I'm no longer feeling, I could be wrong about this. This is just my gut feeling. Whatever behind the scenes tension that existed since Jerry's arrival, since season 4. I understand it. It's not friend business, it's show business, right?
Right.
And again, to my original eye-rolling first blush response to seeing the quote-unquote first contact Borg sphere prologue scene, which you enjoyed, and I did enjoy too.
Yeah.
I thought seeing like more examples of like touchy-feely Borg would take away from like the old classic Terminator, you can't reason with them, you can't stop them. I thought that, kind of like an episode like this would take away from that menace, but it's so different when you think about it. It makes the Borg so much more interesting, right? Because that once unstoppable force of the collective, when you strip it down, there's a very, very real human trait that we see with all of them, and that's the fear of being alone. That it's so human that it's awe-inspiring to watch when that subversion is revealed. And I really do have to thank Ronald D. Moore for that, because I think without him helming this, I would have been right about my other notions that I mentioned at the beginning. How about you?
Yeah, so I had a similar experience right at first. And when I started, furiously taking down my notes on first viewing, I thought, okay, is it too soon to go back to the Borg and tell another Borg story? And a good part of me thought, you know what? You shouldn't tell this story with 7 of 9, because the way that 7 of 9 is brought into the show, there is something so unique about her, being assimilated at such a young age, and being human and growing into who she is, that I thought, you know what? We're really diluting that if we have this other side story where, but actually she was separated from the collective before, and she had this experience as an individual around other Borg. They were expressing their individuality, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And it just seemed out of step, and it made her story to me feel less dramatic and less unique. to know that this had already happened, right? But here's the thing. I was wrong, because by doing that, by framing the story that Ronald D. Moore did here, we do actually open up this window to dive even deeper into Seven's psychology. And here's the other thing. You mentioned the old line that it's not show friends, it's show business, right? Okay, here's the other thing about show business. If you're a guest star on a show, the show's not about you. You are there to support the stars of the show, right? So the stars of the show, like they've already got it down. They know what they're doing. You're essentially, look, you're not a prop, because clearly these people can act. Clearly these people were hired for their talents. But at the end of the day, you're going home and they're not. It's still their show. So the goal here with these guest stars is to elevate and support the much deeper dramatic arcs that we get out of the stars. And in this case, Jeri Ryan is the star through and through, because we get into even more depth with her character. Like, every time Voyager comes along with a story that makes me go, oh, wow, they've really gotten into the psyche and what makes this character tick. Well, you wait a couple of weeks and they do it again. And they do it again in this fresh way that just makes you feel the humanity all over again. So I'm very happy to take back my initial impression and think, not only is it a good thing to have this story come along and it be a Borg story and it be about this moment of separation and reasserting individuality, I feel like we need Seven to have these moments, because it just reinforces how strong that payoff is when we get to the end. We're going to come back to that ending moment in just a moment here. But as an episode, you've got great drama. You got great performances all around. You mentioned it earlier, too. The makeup effects, really good. Really love the way everything looks here. And, for the show to serve what it needs to do, which is to explore more of what makes Seven tick, what makes her unique, it serves the purpose very well there, too. Now, let's talk about morals, meanings, messages, because I think here we've got at least a couple of moments that are spelled out for us, no less important, no less profound. Chakotay and the Doctor have their two different takes on what's happening with Seven's decision about these three ex-Borg. Chakotay says, a month as an individual or a lifetime as a drone. Which one would you choose? Then we go to Seven's conversation with the Doctor, and the Doctor finally gets it when he sort of puts things into Seven's own words. Survival is insufficient. The idea of simply being alive is insufficient compared to the need to be an individual, to experience that part of life again. So I love what we get out of that scene. I love what we get out of the heartbreak of Seven's decision and how this has been a lifetime in the making for her. But I think we have two moments here that really bookend each other quite well. Janeway really spells it out for Seven when she says blood is thicker than water. And at first that's just kind of a throwaway line. It's just like, here's this old adage, you'll figure it out, Seven. Don't worry, that's just a thing that we say, right? But it is so much more profound than that, and it really is a running theme on Voyager. And you pointed out a moment ago that they don't always get that theme right, and we don't always get our characters acting in a consistent way to drive that home. But when it's at its best, I think Voyager really is this show about family, about found family. And I love it when they can stick the landing on something like that, as they do here, because that kind of throwaway adage is brought home in such a sweet, thoughtful, profound, simple way at the end. And it's just Naomi going in to check in on her friend and reinforcing the idea that this is family. So the more that Voyager can drive home that kind of message, and the more that it can do it through the simple humanity of these characters, that is what it's all about. How about you, Norman?
Yeah, I mean, we're on the same page here, and we're pretty much like quoting from the same scene. I mean, it was
as we do. Yeah.
I mean, it was pretty evident, when we got to that scene. This was a scene in the fourth act where Janeway says, "There's an old saying to Seven, blood is thicker than water," and then she continues on saying, "It means that the ties of the family run deeper than any other kind of relationship. We'll often do things for members of our family we'd never dream of doing for anyone else." There's a great scene in a movie called The Town, directed by Ben Affleck. So there's a great scene between the characters played by Ben Affleck and Jeremy Renner. They're best friends. They're friends from all the way back to being Boston Southies. And Ben Affleck's character, I'm paraphrasing the scene, he walks in and basically barges into Jeremy Renner's house, and he says, "I need you to do something for me. You can't ask me anything about it, and we're going to hurt some people." And then Jeremy Renner's character said, "Whose car we driving?" Without hesitation. Without hesitation.
Yeah.
And so, not this particular decision, but with Seven's particular decision, how many of us has been faced with this type of found family decision? How many of us have been faced with defining family in such a way that justifies why we made said decision when we're faced with it? We can literally spend lifetimes contemplating these memories, these choices, because there are so many intersecting moments where family and found family define who we are and what we believe. But it all starts with a connection. Or perhaps in Seven's case, her choice to connect. I recently watched a commercial starring Christopher Walken. And it was so perfectly acted and directed because he delivered perhaps one of the most stirring and compelling monologues I've ever heard about this very moral meaning and message. I would like to share this with you, John, with all of our audience now. And I won't do it as a parody because the meaning behind it is just too powerful. The words are just too good. Quote, "We are born alone. We die alone. And in between, we spend our lives looking for something, a connection. That's all we want. Every once in a while, we might find it in a true friend. Many friendships will come only to fade as quickly as a firework. But some, a rare, precious few, turn life up to 11 and keep it there. You gotta hold on to friends like these because just like air, you'll miss them when they're gone. No one else gets it, but they do. Because they know what's in your soul, your heart, your mind. They can blindside you, come out of nowhere, but you'll know them. Right away, you'll click. As perfectly as a jack plugged into an amp, they'll know what you're thinking before you've thought it. Anticipating your every move, they'll understand the demons as well as the angels inside of you, never judging you for it either. And together you'll engage a thrill that makes you surge with life. But don't be fooled. Friendships are not easy. You gotta put the effort in and take as good as care of them as you do your own flesh." End quote. And again, a month as an individual or a lifetime as a drone? Which option would you choose?
Mission Log is produced by Roddenberry Entertainment. If you'd like to support us directly, you can do so at patreon.com/missionlog for early access to shows and the Mission Log Discord. Our website is missionlogpodcast.com, and for more Star Trek news and discussion, visit trekmovie.com.
On the next Mission Log, Barge of the Dead.
Some of the music for Mission Log provided by Warp 11, online at warp11.com. Special thanks to consulting producers, Matt Esposito, Homer Frizzell, Rand Hurl, Tom Kozak, Julie Miller, Mike Richards, Mike Shadable, Paul Shadwell, and David Takechi. It seems like there should be a song for this occasion. Now you're just some Borgie that I used to know. transmission.
This is a Roddenberry podcast. For more great podcasts, visit podcast.roddenberry.com.